So we have this sin nature. We're born with it. It's part of our being. It's part of who we are. Okay? And if that wasn't enough, we have two other enemies to contend with in our lives. And that is the world and Satan. Okay, Psalm 51 and verse 3. For I know my transgressions and my sin is always before me. Against you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are proved right when you speak and justified when you judge. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. So we're literally born with this sin nature. And even the Apostle Paul struggled with this. Now, it's kind of hard for me to imagine how somebody like Paul, who actually was face to face with the risen and glorified Lord, still struggled with sin. But let's take a look. Turn to Romans chapter 7. Oops. Okay, Romans chapter 7, starting with verse 18. 7:18. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For what I do is not the good I want to do. No, the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. So even the Apostle Paul struggled with sin because he still had the sin nature. That was not taken from him. And a good practical example of that is, imagine looking at a group of small children, maybe toddlers, and one child has a toy and the other one wants it, right? And he's going to grab it, he's going to go after it, he's going to, all of this sort of thing. And then once he gets the toy, he may not even play with it, right? Okay, we know that happens. All right, so that testifies the fact that we don't need to train students or children to be selfish. It comes naturally, right? We have to teach them to do exactly the opposite. So we have this sin nature. We're born with it. It's part of our being. It's part of who we are, okay? And if that wasn't enough, we have two other enemies to contend with in our lives, and that is the world and Satan. So those are just additional ones here. Now the term world has several scriptural meanings, okay? If you look at that and go to the background of it, but I'm referring to the word world to mean the system of politics, morality, economics, and philosophy that embraces a humanistic world view. In that view, God is neither recognized nor taken into account. Let's turn to the book of 1 John, please. Okay, we're going to take a look at 1 John chapter 2 and verses 15 and 16. 1 John 2, 15 and 16. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. So there he's talking about that world system, that philosophy, and John describes the world as a wretched place full of lust and pride. Let's take a look at one other passage here dealing with this. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Okay, beginning at verse 18. Do not deceive yourselves. If any one of you thinks he is wise by the standards of this age, he should become a fool, so that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight. As it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows that the thoughts of the wise are futile. And so there, Paul is speaking of man's wisdom and philosophy. That's the philosophy of the world, which he calls foolishness. And let's look at one other passage. This I find very interesting in the book of Isaiah. So if you turn to Isaiah, please. Chapter 5. Chapter 5 and verse 20. And it says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." Does that sound like our world today? If you take a look at it, actually calling evil good and delighting in it, we see that all around us. And so the world has a very strong, influence on us. But again, that verse is just amazing to me when I think of today's culture and what's happening, what's going on there. And that's certainly happening. I taught in the public schools for 32 years. And there were, and I think there's some good things that are going on in the public schools. I'm not going to say that. But I don't think I could teach there anymore. I don't think I could be part of that, because I disagree with so much of what is being currently presented. And we do see lots of parents now who are transferring their children to private schools or engaging in homeschooling. They just want to protect their children from that influence of the world. And then consider the internet. When I was younger, I could not imagine having a device in my hand that had an encyclopedia of knowledge of everything. I mean, it just boggles my mind when I think about that. I mean, that's really amazing, isn't it? That we have all of this technology, but also consider what social media is doing, especially to our younger people, okay? And in many cases, it's literally destroying their lives. And so we have that. So the world system, the system has tremendous power and wields great influence over how we live, including the decisions that we make. And so the world, that is just another thing that we need to contend with. And then, besides that, there's Satan. And Satan, remember, is a God-created angelic being who revolted against God. Now, we were just in the book of Isaiah here, so let's just turn over to Isaiah 14. Okay, 14, and we're going to read from verses 12 through 15. All right, it says, "How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn! You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the grave, to the depths of the pit." You see a lot of I in that passage, again and again and again. Of course, many commentators, even though that actually was written about a king, if you look at the context in there, but many commentators really believe that passage describes the fall of Satan, because his sin was pride, very, very much. Okay, let's turn also to John, Gospel of John, chapter 8. Okay, John, and let's see here, 8:44. And here, Christ in his earthly ministry is talking to the Jews here. He says, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desire. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So we see that here Satan is described very much as it's very much the opposite of God. There's no truth in him at all. He's the father of lies. And in his first epistle, Peter declares also that the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And I found an interesting quote here from Billy Graham. Billy Graham said, don't think of Satan as a harmless cartoon character with a red suit and a pitchfork. He is very clever and powerful, and his unchanging purpose is to defeat God's plans at every turn, including his plans for your life. And in 2 Corinthians, Paul mentions Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. So Satan is truly the great deceiver, and he tempts us by painting sin in a positive light, emphasizing its temporary pleasures. So we have three things to contend with here when we're talking about sin. We have our own nature, we have the whole world system, and we have the person of Satan. And so we have a lot to contend with here, with that's going to lead us into temptation and possibly lead us into sin as well. So the next area is, what are the effects of sin then? Okay, well, there's a very broad effect that's very obvious, and that is the wages of sin is death, right? That's a very obvious one, okay? And as human beings, all human beings, past, present, future, will suffer the deserved consequences of their sin, which is physical death. The only exception to that is if we're alive during the rapture, right? That's the only exception. So there will be, but I remember a former pastor saying, the death rate is the same. It's one apiece, right? The same for every person, one apiece. That's it. And we know that our funeral homes and services, they're not going to run out of customers, are they? Okay. So that's our. So this is just the obvious consequence. There are also natural consequences of sin. Okay, and I'll give you some examples of those. People who murder or steal will probably end up in prison, and their freedom is gone then. Okay, people who are sexually promiscuous increase their chances of getting a serious disease. And people who suffer from substance addiction harm their family and hasten their own death. Unfortunately, I can speak from personal experience on this with my family and suicide in my family and all of that, which was a direct result of substance abuse. And so it's a very difficult thing to handle, but it is there. So there are natural consequences. That's just natural for everybody.